Why does a narrow point of view actually limit us as human beings? When we hold on to one perspective, we unconsciously filter reality, seeing only what fits our beliefs. Like looking through a keyhole, we notice a fragment, but truly miss the wide landscape. And in quantum, in those terms, infinite possibilities exist, but our focus collapses them into single probability that feels inevitable, even though other outcomes are equally real.
The Voices of Victory podcast show.
Voices of Victory.
Vision.
Voices of Victory.
Leadership.
Voices of Victory.
Workplace-related topics.
The Voices of Victory.
Voices of Victory. Voices of Victory. Voices of Victory.
It's time for the show. You are now listening to the Voices of Victory podcast show.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mario Di Leone.
All right, we're going to take a very deep dive into the quantum realm today. We're going to have some fun. We're going to talk about how possibility takes us to probability, which alters reality. This is literally where science, spirit, and the observer all come together. Here's the deal. We actually live in a world where possibility is everywhere, but it doesn't stay wide open forever, and our point of view has a lot to do with what we're able to see. Our brain has filters. So whether we're looking through the lens of physics, neuroscience, maybe medicine, or the spiritual edge, it all eventually comes together in one reality. It all emerges as one reality. So when it comes to science, it's how reality narrows down. Quantum physics, in the quantum world, the particles exist in many possible states at once. And when we measure them, when a detector or a device starts to observe, the possibilities collapse into probabilities and one outcome becomes real. Now, when it comes to neuroscience, this is the beauty of it all. In the brain, the multiple actions are always being prepared. You could reach left, right, fast or slow, but as new sensory information starts to show up and come in, like the weight of the cup or the distance from your hand, the brain reshapes the field. And some actions become more probable than others until one choice is actually made. So if we look at medical diagnosis, for example, there's always the possibility, which is what frightens people because there's a level of uncertainty. A patient walks into the doctor's office with fatigue, dizziness, and of course maybe some headaches. At this stage, everything is possible. Dehydration, stress, vitamin D deficiency, or maybe something serious. But probability starts to shift when the blood work actually comes back. The iron levels are low. Instantly, the field of possibility narrows. Now, anemia becomes the most probable explanation. The reality of it is the diagnosis is made. The patient now lives in a different reality than before. But notice what changed it. What shifted the reality? All it took was new information for the entire reality to shift. So when it comes to the spiritual mapping of things, this same exact pattern shows up in our lives. We have possibility, which takes us over to the potential of things. Life itself is a big fat field of infinite potential. I mean, every single outcome, every version of you exists as a possibility, and there's dozens of decisions that you can actually make. But can you see that far? Can you widen your view? Because people can be micro viewers or macro. The folks that look at things in a micro way would look at things in the small details. But if you start to look at the big picture in a macro way, you open your mind and your heart to possibility. You're no longer playing it small. You're no longer thinking small. It's important for us to have the micro thinking to understand the details. But when it comes to reality actually shifting, it's crucial for us to step into the macro, because being in that macro point of view, looking at the big picture, opens you up. It opens your heart, it opens your mind to many possibilities. That's the fun part. So when it comes down to probability, which is connected to our intention and awareness, we have to have intention. Intention comes before action, but the intention plus awareness. And when we introduce that new awareness, that expanded awareness, we have insights, we have wisdom, maybe some spiritual truths. Maybe we're looking at the situation in its totality. The whole field shifts. Suddenly, some futures become more probable than others, and awareness starts to slowly tilt the scale. And that takes us over to reality, the manifestation observation of things. And once you act on that awareness, once the outcome crystallizes into your lived reality, it feels like a massive shift. But really, you simply introduced new information to the field of possibility. But this is the very reason when we think micro instead of macro, we start to understand that there's other people that are looking at their situations with the micro point of view. And by doing so, they are stopping their ability to look at the bigger, broader picture. They are preventing their own vision from noticing the large, gigantic field of possibility, all because their point of view is a micro point of view. This is where it gets very interesting, because once you act on awareness, that one outcome crystallized and it goes right into your lived reality. And all you really did was simply introduce new information to the field of possibility. And this takes us over to the observer effect, which is the unanswered question. It gets fun here because physics show us that the act of measurement collapses all the possibilities into outcomes. But we've only studied this with devices, detectors, sensors, instruments, things that are mechanical. But what about human consciousness itself as the actual measuring device? That's the part of science that hasn't been able to quantify that yet. This is the open door, the what if. What if awareness shapes probability? What if consciousness doesn't just watch reality, but helps impact it, influence it, or even select it? We don't know for sure. No one really knows for sure. But the question itself changes how we can actually look at life. Think of the analogy of planting a garden. Think of planting a garden. At first, any plant is possible. Tomatoes, roses, maybe some sunflowers, maybe some carrots, whatever you decide. Once you pick the seeds and prepare the soil, the field of possibility shifts. Now, tomatoes can indeed be probable if you selected them. But when you water and tend to them, tomatoes become the lived reality. And if you've planted 20 and only 3 come out, that can tell you a little bit about it as well. And sometimes you just got to plant more seeds. That's the thing. Information impacts reality. And this is where putting out more seeds can start to shift stuff even more. You may have to introduce new information over and over again. Maybe we have to introduce new soil as the information. Maybe we have to introduce plant food as the new information. So this is what goes on. Once you pick the seeds and prepare all that, we can see that the tomatoes are the probable one. But the same thing happens with our choices, with our awareness, with our consciousness, and the macro level of thinking, the ability to think big and wide. Now, you can think big and wide. That can make a person very lofty and look at the big picture of life. But at some point, you have to take that big picture thinking and bring it down to reality. It's about taking that big picture of what's possible and grounding it with effort in your own reality. With new information, whether it's scientific data, plant food, new soil, or spiritual insight, certain outcomes can become more probable. With aligned action, one reality becomes true. We see court cases all the time to where it looked really grim, but new information was introduced and suddenly the entire case took a landslide shift. And it happens quite a bit. So how can we make reality shift with just mere information? Well, if you take a look at medicine, a single lab result can change a life. In law, a single piece of evidence can flip the entire case on its nose. And in your own life, one insight, as long as your ability to open up your eyes and heart wide, you could start to bring in that awareness and transform possibility into probability, and probability into your lived reality. That's the bridge. That's the bridge. Science tells us how information collapses possibility into outcomes. Spirituality suggests that consciousness itself might be the ultimate observer, the one shaping probability into reality. And that's all I have for you today. Hopefully you like and subscribe. And feel free to comment consciousness below and like and subscribe and share. Share this with people who will enjoy it, who are open to it. Have a great day. See you on the next episode.